Morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's webinar on importing, culling and processing. So not much about adjusting as such, but more about the front to back workflow. If this is your first webinar, so you know who you're listening to, my name's David. I'm part of the software sales team based out of Copenhagen in Denmark. What we have today is roughly a 60-minute session. It might be a bit less today. We'll see how it goes, and depending on your questions, as you are welcome and encouraged to ask questions throughout the webinar. If you're on your Mac or PC, if you look at the bottom of your GoToWebinar control panel, you'll see a section called questions. Just put your question in there and that will come straight through to me. If you're on your iOS device, excuse me, or an Android device, then there's a question mark icon on the screen, and again you can tap that and it will come straight through to me. So please don't be shy, just ask any question you like on today's subject matter. I am recording the session as well, so don't feel you have to remember everything. You can always watch it again at your leisure. And you'll receive information on where you can watch that in a follow-up email, which you get in a couple of days' time. But I'll mention that again at the end of the webinar as well. Okay, so let's flick over to Capture One. Just bear with me a second. So we get Capture One up on screen right now. And let's get the questions panel up nice and big so we can see what's what. Okay, so what you can see on screen now we're actually going to ignore. We're going to start from the beginning, and we're going to use a catalog today. There are two different ways of handling or file management in Capture One. That's via a catalog, which you may know as a library from if you're used to using Aperture, or a catalog if you're used to using Lightroom. It's exactly the same thing in Capture One. You can also use something called a session, which I won't necessarily look at today. If you're interested in knowing more about the session workflow, then there's a previous webinar you can watch called Catalog or Session. So that will give you some insight into that. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to, as I said, start from scratch. So straight away, we're going to make a new catalog like so. Shift-Command-N is the shortcut. You can see the shortcuts here, and Capture One always next to their command. So let's just call this webinar. No, tell you what, let's just call it David's catalog, for example. And where are we going to put this? Well, let's just choose a location. Sorry, the location you can select by clicking this button here like so. Actually, let's get my mouse locator up. This will just help you follow the mouse on screen if it's a little bit difficult. So this button here, this will decide the location of our catalog. Now at this point, we're not concerned about the location of images. This is the catalog database. So let's just make a new folder and tuck it out of the way. Can't spell, Wednesday. So we're going to place our catalog in here. So let's say choose David's catalog and open it up. So that's popped up a new catalog. See, my old session behind is actually still open. You can have multiple catalogs and sessions open at the same time if you wish. Let's just close that one down though and make this nice and large. So I have a brand new empty catalog which we can start to bring images into. Now the only thing that we've done so far, if I just right click here, we've created this, the catalog database. So that's where potentially images could go, but it's basically tracking the location of images and knowing certain things about them, like the adjustments and so on. So right now it's just an empty database. Good question from Paul saying, I presume it's okay to store a catalog on a Dropbox. I have done it myself and it seems to work okay without hitch, but I did have a friend who was doing the same thing and he did have an issue, but as yet I don't know whether it was caused by Dropbox or not. I mean, just be a little bit careful, I guess. It depends if you're intending to share it or do something with it, but I'd say just run a small catalog on Dropbox and see how it goes. Just maintain it over a few weeks and see if it's reliable or not. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. but just I'd say tread carefully for the moment. Okay, so now we need to get some images into our catalog, of course, and this is where really the subject of what today's webinar is about. So what I've done, I've just put, to simulate something as real world as I can, I've just put a bunch of raw files on an SD card, which I'm going to put in the SD card reader right now, or sorry, in the laptop right now, just to show you what I've got. See, it's popped up in Capture One automatically. So we've got an SD card with just a bunch of raw files on there like so. So this is what happens. We get our import dialog pop up, and this is where we can start to bring stuff into our catalog. Alexander, I think your question is going to be answered in the next section, so keep your ears and eyes open. So really, in the import window, it's pretty straightforward. So we have an import from, where are we getting our images from, and an import to, where do we want to put those images. If you're in a hurry or you want to keep it simple, you can pretty much ignore everything else. So really, import from and import to, they're the most important ones. So import from is obviously our SD card, and import to, where do we want to store your files. So you have some choices here under store files. Current location, that really doesn't make a lot of sense right now because the images are on an SD card, a memory card, so we don't really want to leave them on the memory card. We want to get them off that memory card onto our system. So a couple of choices, you can say inside catalog, and those of you who are used to Aperture might want to do this. What will happen if you say inside catalog, let's just get the Finder up, is that the images will be copied directly inside the catalog itself. So what we call a managed image inside that catalog. Similar function existed in Aperture as well. Or we can choose a location where we want to have this. So I'm going to choose a folder. Let's go to Webinar Wednesday, and let's make a folder called Catalog. Whoops. Catalog images. Now, something important to mention here. I've got my catalog database on my internal hard drive, and just for simplicity for this webinar, I'm also storing the images on my internal hard drive. But your catalog images, the images that you want to import into your catalog, could exist anywhere. They could be on an external hard drive, down here, for example. They could be on a server. They could be on a Dropbox, for example. They can be anywhere. So the catalog and images don't have to be in the same location. So this is very useful if, like me, I travel a fair bit. I have my personal catalog sits on my internal hard drive, but all the images actually sit in this external hard drive here because I don't have enough space on my internal hard drive to carry around 20,000 images or whatever it is. So they sit on an external hard drive. So catalog and images can be in two totally different separate locations. Much more powerful workflow because you're not limited by the size of your internal hard drive. Or images can be on several different locations. So if you want to know more about that, you can actually watch previous webinar just on catalogs, which will go into a bit more detail. So I want my import folder here, like so, catalog images. Now, you might conceivably also like to separate out your images into sort of various different folders that make sense. So you'll see here there's a handy option here called subfolder. So let's make a folder. So I know this was road trip USA, for example. And then I want to make a subfolder again. I can just do a /. If you're on a PC, you would do a \. But if I do a /, that means make another folder. So then I'm going to say raw, can't type today, raw files. I really can't type today. Let's just be pedantic. Get rid of that, raw files. And then I'm going to make another subfolder, and we can use something called a token, which will actually decide on a folder for us, which might sound a bit strange, but if I click on this tab, then I've got all these different tokens that can automatically create me a subfolder. So a most useful one, because I know these images were shot at different dates, is to actually split them up by their date. So you see we've got a token here called image date. You see there's a very big list. For example, you could split by camera serial number, you could split by manufacturer type, and so on. But you can divide them up into various different things. I'll just pick date and time. It makes the list a bit easier to manage. And then let's have image date. Now, if you want to change the date format, then you can click on the small arrow here, and then we can choose a different date format. So I'll just go for day, month, year. That's what I'm used to, but you can see you can have year, month, date, month, month, day, day, year, year, and so on, and even down to hours, minutes, and seconds as well. But I'm just going to go for day, month, year. So my images are going to go into my, just to recap, they're going to go into Webinar Wednesday, catalog images, and then the rest of it is all automated in Capture One. So Road Trip USA raw files, and then the date that they were actually taken. So let's say OK. Now, as I said, if you want to keep it simple, just stop there. There's other locations like you can force a backup, so that will just duplicate the raw files. You can do some renaming. If you don't like the naming convention that your camera does, then you can rename it here if you wish. You can add some basic metadata with your copyright and description. You can add a style, which is, if you like, a set of adjustments in Capture One. And we can also add various presets. So a style is basically a collection of all kinds of different adjustments in Capture One, or you can add a preset. For example, I've got a preset which just adds like metadata to the image, like my name, address, and that kind of stuff, if you wish. But otherwise, just keep it simple. Now, good question from Matthias. He says his tokens look white and I can't read them. Then you need to update Capture One. The latest version of Capture One is 8.2.2. There was a change in macOS 10.10.3, which caused the tokens to look white on white, so you couldn't read them. So you just need to be update Capture One, and then everything will be well again. So really, that's all I'm going to do right now. So coming from the SD card, go into my folder catalog images, and then into a further folder called Road Trip USA raw files, and then sort it automatically by the date. So that's 61 images. Let's say import all. Let's just hide, and we can see them pop in, and I'll just have a look at questions. Paul was asking, can you add keywords and import? Yes, you can. You could just do that with a style. Gerald was asking, is there a simple way to automatically create an album name the same as the import directory of the images? No, not currently. You could do that before, and that relates to someone's question. Where is it? Explain collection in import to. Yes, in the import to, if you want to automatically add images to a collection, you could do so. So before the import, you could make a collection, which we're going to come to, and then you could automatically add images to that if you wished. Denny's saying, why is the import slow? I don't think it's pretty slow. I mean, we're importing 60 images. There's only 10 seconds left. If at any point you want to look at an image during the import, you can do so. And then we can zoom in, we can check sharpness. So it's a background task. So while images are importing, there's nothing to stop you working on the first image as soon as it comes in. Bob saying, could the catalog be on a server with the originals? It could, but it all depends a little bit on your server speed. So your network speed, rather, I should say. If they're on something like an old NAS drive, which has very slow network speed, it's going to hamper the performance of your catalog. But in theory, anything is possible, but it just, again, might be down to how fast or slow that access is. Ideally, you want the catalog database locally, and then the images can be elsewhere. Because when we're browsing through images, we're only looking at, if you like, a preview, so that we can snap through images nice and quickly, so we don't actually have to access the raw data. We're just looking at the preview files as such. So it's best to have the catalog database on the fastest performing local disk that you can. Okay. let's have a look at what's happened after our import. So if we just go to the Finder, we go to where it was, Webinar Wednesday, Catalog Images, here we've got Road Trip USA, raw files, like so, and then they're divided up nicely by date, like so. The reason why I have it divided like this, you'll see as we go through the rest of the workflow. Now in the folders area, this shows you the actual location of where your images are. So if we expand that out, we keep the whole hierarchy so you can see. We've got catalog images, Road Trip USA, raw files, and then if I just hide the viewer, you can see they've been automatically sorted by date, like so. So that's just what's going on there. Marcin was asking, can you apply Fuji profiles during import? No, we don't have any of the Fuji profiles, but there are a whole bunch of Capture One styles which you could add to your image. Like there's various built-in styles, color effects, and so on, but nothing that matches Fuji as such. But there's nothing to stop you creating your own. Okay. The folder is automatically created by date. Yes, Denny, that is correct, using the tool in the import window. So now we've got our various different folders of images here. Then most of us like to go some sort of culling process that sorts out the good from the bad as such. Now, if you're used to Lightroom, for example, then you know there's things like accept and reject flags and so on. There isn't necessarily an exact equivalent, but there's a lot of things you can do to easily do something just as fast and just as nice. What I tend to do at this stage is obviously do a bit of color tagging just to really sort out the ones that I'm going to throw away and the ones that I'm going to keep. The way I do that, as I said, is using color tags. And color tags are shown here. So you see currently we have no color tag and we have a choice of various different color tags. And then also we have star ratings here like so. Now the important thing is that these have shortcuts. So if we look at adjustments, rating, you can see star ratings is done by number on the keyboard. Color tag, we can have green is plus, yellow is star, red is minus. You can change all that if you wish. So if you wanted to, make those letters, you could. It really doesn't matter what those shortcuts are. I added one Shift X for none. To edit those shortcuts, just go to Edit, Capture One Shortcuts, find the category, Adjustments, Color Tag, and then we can change the shortcut here just by clicking in that space. So if I wanted one for orange, I could click here and then tap the keyboard combination that allows me to do that. So just change those if you wish. So we can go through. You could do it a slow way, which is choosing it here, which, as I said, or we can use our keyboard shortcuts to say this is a keeper, so that's plus, advance to the next one, minus is red, and so on. But there's actually a quicker way to do that. Let's clear those back. Down here in the filters tool, we have various different ways to filter the image. And a nice way to sort of auto advance the images so it's nice and quick is start by choosing no color tag. So show me the images which have no color tag, which is of course every single image right now, but that's going to change as I rate them. So for example, if I very quickly can go through, so I'm going to say this is a green and it disappears because it's no longer doesn't have a color tag and it auto advances to the next one. So I'm going to say this is green, this is green. I'm not sure if that's in focus. Rather than having to open the image up, I could grab the loop tool and then we could just click and then I could see, well, is anywhere in focus? Nope. So to me, that's probably a reject. So I'll say minus and that's red. One of these I'll keep. They look pretty similar. That one's just about in focus, so we keep that reject. Not sure if I want to keep that, so I'll say yes anyway. Yes. And see, I'm just pressing plus on the keyboard to go through all these images. I'll make a selection of probably one of those. So I'm just going to make all of those green. So I can just select all and I use my shortcut. We keep both of those. See, I don't like throwing images away, not many reds, so I'm probably green, 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 green. All of those three are pretty similar, so I'll probably keep the first one and get rid of the next two. Minus, minus, keep that one. Let's see, sharpness wise, P on the keyboard to choose the loop, by the way. So that's probably looks a little bit on compared to this one. The first one's a little bit sharper. So let's keep the first one, minus for that one, green, 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 done. So if we want to verify, I just clear my filters using the option here. Now I've got everything back. I can see, well, these are all the greens I picked, and these are all the reds that I picked, like so. I can go over again and check, do I really want to get rid of them? If I do, I can just do Command A to select all, and then Command backspace, and then that says, do you want to delete them? And this is an important message here. So my images are stored outside the catalog, meaning that they're referenced images, so they're not stored, let's backtrack, they're not stored here, they're stored here. So they exist on my hard drive. So Capture One is saying, do you want to move the corresponding image files to the system trash, or do I want to keep the files in place? Well, I don't want them, so I'm going to say move to trash, and they've gone. Werner was asking, I'm on 8.1, but I've only got the Sony version. I can't seem to find updates to 8.2. Just go to, if you need to update, it's very simple. Just go to download on the Phase One site and right here, download Capture One Pro 8. There's only one download, whether you're on the Sony version, the DB version, it's all in one download. So just go to download and grab that version and just install it over the old one. Justin saying, can you show more filters at any one time? Yes, you can. I've just deleted the reds, but we'll do it on the next one. So if we go here, same thing, we say no color tag, and then green, 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 red, like so. And you see that's nice and fast. So if we want to verify, I can see I have my 6 greens and my 1 red. If you want to combine color tags, that was Justin, option click. So if I do an option click, then I can see green and red at the same time. So if you're using yellow like as a I'm not quite sure sort of denominator, then you could do that. So again, if we just say show me the red, select all, backspace, move to trash. Next folder, no color tag. That's a bit boring, so that's red. Nice portrait. P on the keyboard for the loop. Let's just check this is in focus. Yeah, probably good enough. So we call that green, 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 green. Don't like that. Green, like so. Again, choose my reds. Am I really sure I want to delete those? Yes. Command All, backspace, move to trash. Again, all using the keyboard. No need to use the mouse really. And finally, let's see. I think I'm going to keep all of those. So select all, plus on the keyboard, like so. And then as they're all selected, you can see that if I use the various different shortcuts, that they all change at the same time, like so. So now I've got the first stage of the culling, if you like. So I've got my various green ones. I've got rid of the reds. Oh, let's clear my filters. So I've only got the keepers as such. Sorry, I'm just reading your questions. If you're in the catalog or album instead of the folder, would these images here have been deleted? Well, we're currently in the catalog pool. So as I said, from that, if you try and delete an image, you can either keep the image actually physically on the disk, but it won't show in your catalog, or you can move the image to the trash. So I've been moving to the trash. I've got no desire to keep dud images on the hard drive, just taking up space. So now we've done a sort of basic, okay, this is the one I want to keep. You could do, if you like, a second level on star rating as well, which is what I tend to do. Because if there's a lot of images and I don't have much time, I might like to concentrate on the really good images first. So we can do a similar thing. We can say down here, just over here, we can say no star rating. And then using the keyboard, shortcut key again, the numerical keys, I can say that's a 5, that's a 4, I think that's a 5, 4, 4, 3, 5, 5. And again, there's a whole bunch which are similar there. So I might just make all of those 4s maybe, like so. And then 4, 4, you get the idea, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, because I want to look at those closer. 5. Someone was asking what year is the car. I think it was 60, it's on the plate. 69, there we go, 69 Firebird for your information. So maybe that's a 5, 5, 5. I obviously think I'm much better than I am. 5, 5, 5, like so. Similar thing. And we could do the same thing with all the rest of those folders as well. Let's just make a few 5s just to show you something on the next stage. So let's have a 5 there, and a 5 there. And let's have skeletons and dog, and here we go. So that's sort of, if you like, the first way that I go through all the various things. Green or red, sometimes yellow if I'm not sure, and then star rating to go through. Now, all of this so far we've done in the folders area. So this is the various folders by date where we had our raw files, like so. Now, I personally stop the process at this point. If you want to, you can make new folders here by pressing plus if you want to start moving images around. Like if you want to start moving images from folder to folder, you can drag and drop, for example, if you wish, but mine are automatically sorted by date, remember. So I don't do any more sorting here. You can, as I said, add folders. You could move images to like a selects folder if you wanted to, but I think that's a really slow and cumbersome way of working. I like to have some organization here, but I do the rest in user collections, which is what some of you were asking about earlier. Okay, Andrew was saying, could I also do this in the recent imports section? Yeah, of course you could, if you wanted to. Recent imports up here. This shows me the last import of everything. So this will just show you every single image that you just imported. So there's nothing to stop you going through and blasting through the whole lot, sort of green, yellow, red, star rating. But I just, for some reason, I like to just do it by the various different dates so I can remember what the shoot was all about and so on. But yes, there's nothing to stop you doing it in recent imports and doing it all in one hit, for example. And just to clarify up here, all images shows you where every single image is in the catalog, regardless of where it's stored. So next, as I said, if you want to start doing more organizing here by making folders, moving images, you can do. Just remember to do it in Capture One so that Capture One keeps up with where you've moved images to and so on. But as I said, I think that's a little bit of a slow and old-fashioned way to work. You can do a lot more stuff in user collections and a lot faster and a lot more intelligent. So let's make something called a project. That's done by clicking this plus button here. You can actually, if it's faster for you, to right click and just say new inside, and let's make a project, and we call this USA road trip, for example. So that makes me a project. Now I can't drag anything into that project as such. I need to make an album. Excuse me. So you can see actually the project denominator looks like a cardboard box with a lid on it. So we can't throw our images directly in that box. We need to sort them in a sort of a bit more of an intelligent way than rather just dumping them in there. So if I right click on the project, I can say let's make an album, and I'm just going to call this all images, like so. And as Andrew suggested, what we could do is go to my recent imports, select all, and just dump the whole lot into all images like so. So that shows me every single image that came from Road Trip USA. So 53 images in total, like so. And now at this point, we can go through and start to adjust and so on. But the nice thing about user collections is that we can do some sort of a bit more clever sorting. So rather than moving images around to like a selects folder or something, let's use the power of the star rating and color tags. So for example, I could right click again and say new inside the USA road trip. Let's make a smart album, and let's call this, let's say 4-star, whoops, 4-star and above. So those are the ones that I probably would like to start working on first. So you see there's some presets over here to prevent me having to build a search criteria like 4-star or higher. Then you've got all your various color tags here as well. So you can see it's automatically made as a search criteria. Rating is greater than or equal to 4 stars. Let's say okay. So now I've got a smart album which has all those 4-star and above images in there. There's nothing to stop you making another smart album, for example, which is simply, whoops, we need to edit that. You can edit a smart album. I did that on purpose, of course, by right clicking and saying edit smart album. And let's make that 5-star images, for example, and the preset we want is 5-star. Automatically gives us rating equals 5 stars. Okay, like so. So now we can see all images, we could see the 4-star and above, we could see the 5-star images. If you want to sort by date, just simply use the date filter down here. Oh, I want to see the stuff I shot on Friday. Here it is. I want to see the stuff I shot on the Saturday. There it is. I want to see the stuff I shot on the Sunday. So don't forget, you can instantly filter at any time. You don't have to be restrained by raw files in a physical folder physically on the hard drive. Remember, all the images have tons of metadata which you can access in the filters tool. So again, if you want to see all images that were shot, say on a particular lens, I can see camera lens here. Actually, not much to sort. It was all shot on the same lens, but you could sort by aperture if you wanted to. So we've got 14 images that were shot wide open at f1.8 and so on. So there's all kinds of different categories that we can look at in the filters tool. If you want to add categories, just go to the 3 dots here and say show hide filters, and then these are the various different filters that you can show on. So camera lens, serial number, all kinds of stuff that probably isn't much use, and lots of things that is a lot of use, like the stuff we talked about, lenses, aperture, camera serial number if you wanted to divide up the shoot into different serial numbers and so on. Don't forget, any of this stuff can be automatically converted to a smart album. So that's a different way of building a smart album. If, for example, you wanted to see everything that was color tagged green, like so, which is everything in this case, let's think of something a bit more useful. Here we go. Let's just do the aperture model again. So this is everything that was shot at f1.8. If we click on the 3 dots here, we could say create a smart album or an album with the current images. A smart album is dynamic, so it's going to change. So if we said create smart album, I could say f1.8 shots, say save, and then it makes that smart album for me like so. So that's just a different way of making a smart album. As I said, all this is dynamic, of course. So if I then decide what on earth was I thinking, that's definitely not a 4-star shot, it's really sort of boring, etc., then I could downgrade it to a 3, like so, and now it's actually disappeared from my 4-star and above. Again, same thing here. If I decided that's definitely not a 4-star shot, this one up here, let's downgrade that to a 3, then it's gone from that album. If you do it the old-fashioned way of making a folder, calling this my selects or whatever, then you're always moving stuff around on disk. It's just, I think, far more intelligent to use the power of a collection up here. I can't remember who was asking. It was Andy was asking, can we import movie clips? Some movie clips, can you tag and color rate them? I can't remember, Andy, I'm sorry. Some movie formats are supported, but I can't remember if they can be rated. I'll find out for you. Just shoot me an email if I forget. Someone was asking, can you search across multiple catalogs at the same time? No, the search and filtering functions is only for the currently open catalog, because we're searching a database essentially. So we're not searching across 2 databases at the same time. Marcin was asking, can you dim the lights as such? You can change the background color. It's not quite the same as Lightroom, but if we go into preferences and appearance, you can change the colors to various different things here if you wish. But I know that's not quite the same as Lightroom, but you can influence that. If you'd selected to put the images inside the catalog, would it show you the corresponding folder structure? No. If you've stored images inside the catalog, and we can actually move one in there if you wish. Let's just move this image inside the catalog like so. Then it pops in here. So we can see this image belongs inside the catalog. These images belong outside the catalog. We don't show you the folder structure of that. It's stored inside David's catalog, for example. There's really no benefit to that. And then we can move it back out of the catalog if we wished as well. You can't create an album on import, but you could create one before import if you wanted to. Yes, Denny, you can create your catalog on an external hard drive. You can create the catalog anywhere as long as you can access that file system. You can browse to that file system. Your catalog can be anywhere. Your images can be anywhere. Your catalog could be on a different computer on the network, and your images could be locally or whatever. As I said, as long as you can access it, you can do it. But for the best performance, you want your catalog database locally, because that's going to be the fastest read-write speed to, flick through images quickly, and so on and so forth. So this is an internal SSD. You can see if we just go to all images, for example, then we can zoom through the images pretty quick. There's no redrawing of thumbnails. If we open an image, we can scan through the others nice and fast as well. So try to have the catalog on your local hard drive. David is asking, can a smart album be based on another smart album so I can get mixes of and or? Yeah, I think I know what you mean. If we just say edit this smart album, you can keep adding the criteria. So the rating must be greater or equal to 4 stars. And then we could say plus, and the date wood is on this, and then the keywords would be this, and so on. So you can keep building all kinds of crazy criteria if you want to. And you see it dynamically changes as I do it. So the rating is equal to that. And you could have whether you've processed it or not, and so on. That's quite a nice smart album to have. Has the image been processed, yes or no? So for example, if I just make this smart album here, smart album, search criteria, is it processed? Not processed. So this will give me images not processed. So I can say not processed, like so, and say OK. And then that's currently full of images because I haven't processed any. But as soon as I process one, it's going to disappear. So this is kind of a good way of seeing which images you have yet to process. Again, you couldn't do that in the folders area because this is the old way of doing it with really out invoking any clever metadata as such. Togan is asking, what's the performance like when you have one catalog with over 50,000 images and use various collections? It's fine. 50,000 isn't really that big for a catalog. You shouldn't really have any issues with that. Again, it's all down to the performance of your system, how fast the internal hard drive is, how much space is left on it, the general health of your system in general, and so on. So 50,000 is really not a big number. Lyndon says, I can't see the left-hand panel. You might have zoomed your viewer a little bit. So if you look on the GoToWebinar control panel at the top, there's a zoom function. So perhaps it's you've just zoomed it a little bit. Okay, Stephen says, projects seem the way to go. Yes, definitely. What constraints are there in terms of number of projects? No constraints, none whatsoever. if I open my own catalog, no, it's on a different drive, so I can't access it. But I think I must have 100 or 200 projects in my catalog, I think. If you get too many projects here, then this sort of list becomes very, very large. There's nothing to stop you subdividing them as well, because we've only looked at projects, albums, and smart albums. There's also groups as well. So, for example, if you wanted to divide up your projects a bit further, if I right click, I can say add a new group. We could have like personal work, for example. This is just looks like a little folder, and then we could dump that project into that. So then now I could have a folder with personal work. I could have another group with professional work, another group with family shots, another group, and so on, just to help organize that area a bit better. So you can imagine if you had 100 projects, you'd be scrolling up and down a lot of the time, for example. Okay. Alrighty. There isn't a limit to the number of images in a catalog. Again, the larger the catalog gets, you might see a bit of performance slowdown, but we're really talking above the sort of hundreds of thousand mark and everything. Again, it's all down to your system speed. Okay, let's have, before we run out of time, let's have a look at the processing side of things. I just saw a couple of people asking about deleting images from an album. It is a bit of a slightly roundabout way, I will admit, because when we're currently looking at images in an album, if we want to sort of permanently delete it, you can say remove from album, but it doesn't actually delete it. If I do a backspace, it just takes it away from that album as such. And I agree that is a little bit silly. What I tend to do is that I just use one of the color tags as something that I want to kill. So if I say purple, for example, if I go to all images, then I just filter by the purples, and then I can delete there. I know that's a bit of a sort of a crazy thing, and it should be easier to delete directly from an album. That is something that we're looking at, but that's the way I do it. I just use purple to tag something I want to delete, go to all images, look at my purples, and then just delete from there as such. Okay, so Alexandra is saying, and this is working with the images as previews, not the real files. Well, depends what you class as real and not real. We are looking at a preview right now, which was created when we imported the images into a catalog. It's totally color managed. It matches the output perfectly. When we make adjustments, obviously we can see real-time feedback straight away. If I zoom into 100%, for example, whoops, wrong shortcut. If we zoom into 100%, now we're looking at the raw data, for example. So we need the raw data to view at 100%, but everything else is done with the preview file. But that makes no difference to you. It's all about performance. The idea of having previews is that we can whiz through images nice and quickly. The adjustments happen nice and fast when we're pulling sliders, for example. But when we zoom in, that's when we're looking at the raw data. Hope that makes sense. Evan's saying I've been color tagging the ones I want to delete and then go to the all images in the catalog and delete. That seems to be the smartest, quickest way of doing it. Okay, so what about processing out side of things? We haven't done any adjustments, but today is not about adjustment. It's about the workflow as such. So let's say we've gone through, we've adjusted our images, we're happy with how they're looking, and now we want to export. Best way to do that is using a process recipe. I can say actually file, export images, and say export variants. I can right click if I wish and say export variants, but that's not the smartest way to do it. You should be using the process recipes. It's much faster, more intelligent, gives you more options, and so on. So a process recipe is simply that, a process recipe. How do you want to process this image to a given location at a given file type and so on. So there's some default process recipes that you can see here, which do various different output types, JPEG, TIFF, PNG, etc. for example. So you can decide what process recipes you want to use, or you can make your own. So if you wanted to make a process recipe, you can just say plus, and then let's say we wanted to have a JPEG that was sized at, say, 2048 pixels wide, for example. Then we would go to our process recipe, change this to JPEG, choose the compression that we want to have, choose our color space profile, choose our resolution and scale. I'll say width, which is 2048, and so on. So that's just a very simple way to build a process recipe. If you go into the next part, there's some other options. We're going to come back to File. Adjustments, you can disable the sharpening, which is quite handy if you want to do that later. You can ignore the crop, which is also very handy. You can decide what metadata you want to have, and you can decide whether you want to have a watermark as such. Thinking about the file management, where do we want to put these exports? Now that's entirely up to you. I'll show you what I do, but of course you could do different. So you've got the first one here is very important, the root folder. This is the folder where the images are going to go when you export them. Currently it's set to output location, which means Capture One is going to look down here and see where you want to put your exports. You can change it, so you could select a folder, which can be very useful for a scenario I'll talk about after this. But for the moment, we're just going to leave it set to output location. You can add a subname, which will just basically put a subname to the image name, and there's a subfolder. But I'm not going to use that here. I'm going to use subfolder down here because we can do some pretty nice stuff. So I'm not going to have 3 process recipes. Let's just have 2 process recipes running. We're going to have a TIFF 8-bit, and we're going to have a JPEG set to my 248 pixels wide, for example. Now, output location, where do I want to actually store the images? So I'm going to choose a folder. We're going to go to my catalog images, road trip, and then I'm going to make a new folder here called exports. Oops, or exports, excuse the spelling. I go into my export folder. And again, like we did on import, we can do something automated with the subfolders. So I'm going to click on this button here, and then what kind of subfolders would we like to have? Well, I think I would probably like to have it divided by, well, we've got all kinds of options here. You could divide it by star rating if you wanted to see like the top images by star rating. You could divide it by color tag, which isn't much sense here because I've only got green images. We could divide it by date again, for example. So we could do that so it matches. So let's just say date and time. Let's say image date once more. I like day, month, year. And then after that, if I do a /, remember backslash if you're on PC, and let's divide it by the, where is it, general, recipe name. So this means I'm going to get a folder which will automatically split them into TIFF and JPEG, which is pretty handy. So the path is going to be my exports folder, then the date that the image was captured, and then divided up by the recipe name, like so. Or we could do it the other way around. No, let's do it this way around. And say OK. So then if you want to check the path, you can click on this arrow. This is a shortcut. So it's telling me it's going to go to exports. Then we're going to have the date that the image was captured, the folder, and then we're going to have the recipe name, and then we have the actual final image as such. So let's just export a few. We don't have to be in, we can be in any view, it doesn't matter. So if we could go to all images, we could select all and export, and they'd be automatically sorted as such. Let's just grab a few which I know are different dates. So let's just grab, say, 4 images here. We grab a couple of images there, and we grab a couple of images there because I know they're from different dates. And then you can use the shortcut, which is Command D, or you can go all the way down here, which is process, like so. And now that starts processing. You can see, if I make this a bit bigger, the orange cog. When it turns white, it means the process is finished. So that one's done, and so on. If we go back to my exports folder, you can see we've got the date that the image was captured, and then we can see our JPEGs, and then we can see our TIFFs, like so. So that sorts that quite nicely. While that's running, we'll just look at some questions. Justin saying, can you have XMP files kept up to date with the star ratings for interoperability between programs? You can use XMP if you wish. You just have to turn it on in the preferences. So in the preferences under general, image, you can say full sync, which will fully synchronize between Capture One and other applications. You can say load, basically read only. Let's say you use a totally different application for star rating, sorting, and so on. You could just ask Capture One to load in that XMP data and so on. So you just have to choose it there what you want to do. Create thumbnails on save. Yeah, that's just allows you to see a thumbnail in the Finder, Gerald was asking. Does the process batch contain all Capture One adjustments by default? Yes, absolutely. The only adjustments that you can't turn off, that you can turn off, is the sharpening and the crop in that particular process recipe. Yes, you could put a watermark 10% anywhere, sort of 10% of the image. So let's say we wanted to watermark this. What I would do is make a process recipe called watermark. And again, this is going to be probably a JPEG, like so. Scale, we could have the longest edge nice and small, like 1280 pixels. The watermark, we could have text, don't copy. You see that's a little bit big at the moment. Let's just make that a bit smaller. We've got the font here is set to 300. That's probably why it's a bit large. So we can make that a bit smaller, or a bit, sorry. And you can see that's in the middle, and then I can move the position of it by dragging the sliders like so. So that could be your watermark recipe. And again, if you're using the tokens in a nice way, then that will automatically put it in a folder called a watermark. So if I just take two images here and say process again, I've got my three recipes checked. So if we go into exports, 1st of May, there's the watermarked image like so with my fantastic watermark on it. So that's all nice and sorted. Good question from Andrew. How do you keep track of the exports in your catalog? Well, if you want to, you could just import the export folder back into the catalog. I don't bother really, because I don't catalog the exports. But if you wanted to, you could just import this folder back into your catalog if you wanted to. So for example, you could just go to the import dialog, select folder, pictures, exports, open, and then you could say include subfolders, and that would show me everything like so, and they would appear back in the folders area too. So you could just import that export folder structure back. Good question from Willem. I shoot RAW and JPEG. Can I import them separately? Otherwise, I see all pictures twice. If you want to be honest, I wouldn't actually bother shooting RAW and JPEG, because if you want a JPEG, just do a quick JPEG export from Capture One. What you could do is just do an auto adjust on everything and then say export to JPEG. But if you don't want to see the JPEG on import, you can just say global filters, always hide JPEG files, and that will hide them from the import window as well. So that's in the filters tool, global filters, like so. One last thing I wanted to mention about Dropbox, for example. Who was asking? someone was asking about Dropbox. Sorry, I missed your name, but yes, for exporting to Dropbox, for example, if you wanted to do that, you could make a recipe called Dropbox, like so. And the only different thing we would do here is under File, we're not going to go to Output Location. You would select your Dropbox folder here. So select folder, and then you know that that process recipe goes straight to your Dropbox, not to the output location. So that's something you can do there. Or that could be Google Drive or SkyDrive or whatever other cloud sharing folder that you might be using. Now, a fun thing I found with Dropbox last week was this, ifttt.com, which is a Dropbox Automator. So you can set Dropbox to work quite nicely. So for example, if you add images to Dropbox, upload them to Facebook. If there was another one, Dropbox, you can just search for recipes as, again, Dropbox Flickr. So auto upload to Flickr via Dropbox, for example. I don't know if there's one for 500px. I haven't searched. Oops. Don't think I saw one. Oh, there we go. New photos in Dropbox 500px folder to 500px. So it's really good, and you can write your own recipes. These are recipes which people have written, so you can see their names here. So it seems to be quite powerful. I haven't really explored it totally yet, but essentially you could put images in Dropbox and then get a service like this to automatically scatter them where you want them to. Or even if you upload to Flickr, you can then get Flickr to put them on Facebook and so on. So you can do a whole bunch of stuff with Dropbox and other things as well. So I mention that because we don't have a publish service in Capture One, like publish to Flickr or Facebook or whatever. But that's a really neat service, which is actually free as well, as far as I can tell from how I've been using it. That you can do really nice automation like this. So ifttt.com seems to work really nice. Okay, we're nearly out of time. Oh, David says, why import JPEG? Because Fuji JPEGs are brilliant. That's right, actually, they are extremely, extremely good. Gert was asking, could we have two recipes with the same settings but a different file name? You could always subfolder them. Or you could always subname them. So if you had two recipes the same, you could just add something into subname, for example, or you could add a subfolder here as well if you wanted to. So yeah, I'm sure you could manage something with those. Andreas is asking, do we support Apple Photostream? Not as far as I'm aware, but I haven't looked into it as much to the whole new iCloud photo sharing as such, but I'm sure there's a way we could do it. Good question from Paul. He's finding the rendering performance with referenced images on external drive during browsing very poor compared to managed files. I'm wondering why this is the case. Well, we do need to access the external drive from time to time just for reading various things. If it's poor, then I would suggest it's probably the speed of the hard drive at fault. Is it USB 2? Is it slow RPM? I mean, I browse on a USB 3 external 7200 RPM drive, and it's as fast as this. I mean, this is internal, but I don't see any speed difference on using my external drive. So just think about the data access speed and also the remaining capacity and how it's connected to as well. Okay, before we finish, last question from Robert. Is there a token available with the name of the session or the catalog? Yes, I think there is. You can certainly do something called session subpath, which might not show up because we're not in a session. So we have session subpath, which basically copies the location of the image to a output folder. So if in the session you've got shot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the capture folder, that will automatically create shot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the export folder. But there is collection name, I know that much. So that will use the name of the current collection that it's in. So if the image was in 4-star and above, we could use the collection name automatically, and so on. So I'm sure, just have a look through the list. There's so many of them. I haven't really had a chance to get my head round all of them yet, but just have a look through and see what you can find. There's probably going to be something that is going to suit your needs as well. Okay, before we have to go, let's just remind ourselves of next week. So bear with me a second. So next week is, if you're coming from Lightroom or Aperture, I mean, if there's some of you from Lightroom or Aperture today, you probably would have picked up a bit, but understanding the file management differences, really. So if you are dithering between coming to Capture One from Lightroom on Aperture, think of that as a bit more of an extension today, and we're going a bit more in depth about the various file management, the limitations in Capture One, the increased abilities in Capture One, and so on, because Capture One is not Lightroom and it's not Aperture. So of course we're going to want to compare it, but it's not identical. So there are some differences that that can help you in terms of keyboard shortcuts, workspaces, and so on and so forth. As I said, don't forget this is being recorded, so you'll get the follow-up email in a couple of days' time, which has information of where that recording is. I think that's about it. So sorry if I couldn't get to all of your questions. I hope you found it useful today. Please hope to see you again next week. Many thanks for your time, and hope to see you all again soon. Take care.